ZZZT. ZZT. In the silent mall, a sample TV played to itself, the signal flickering weakly. NASA had just discovered a comet, and it was approaching Earth. An unknown virus breaks out in Siberia. Those infected become agitated and irritable, feeding mechanically. The number of infected in our country is rising at an alarming rate, and it has now spread to 90% of cities. The TV screen flickered once, then suddenly went dark. The pitch-black screen reflected the light from the entrance. Suddenly, a stiff, twisted figure slowly entered the street. As it moved, it mechanically made a hoarse sound in its throat, as if its windpipe were being strangled. The figure gradually disappeared down the street. The city returned to silence. Pain. Under the stimulation of a splitting headache, I suddenly opened my eyes. I was lying on an uncomfortable bed, and what met my gaze was a field of pale white. White walls, white windows, white sheets, white quilt. I was wearing blue and white striped patient pajamas, and an enforced stand hung from the ceiling. A hospital ward. Memories came flooding back. I was a student at Beishan University's School of Physical Education. Before summer vacation, we played a friendly game against Beishan Petroleum University. During the match, I was pushed down, hit the back of my head on the ground, and passed out on the spot. When I opened my eyes again, it was now. I touched the back of my head. Thick gauze was wrapped around it. I pressed the wound like an idiot, and immediately the world spun while my stomach churned. A mild concussion. After lying there a bit longer, I sat up again. At that moment, I sensed something was off. Quiet. Too quiet. Hospitals usually had all kinds of sounds, but today it was unnaturally silent. I pressed the call button and waited several minutes, but no one came. Nurse. Nurse. My voice wasn't loud, and there was no response even after I shouted. I felt around beside the pillow, then looked at the nightstand. Where was my phone? Without a phone, I couldn't contact the outside world. I started to panic. On the nightstand were several bags of compressed biscuits, chocolate, and a bottle of mineral water. Who would bring these things to visit a patient? Isn't it usually flower baskets and fruit? Leaning on the bed, I slowly made my way to the door, and it took me 2 or 3 minutes to get there. I took a deep breath and turned the door open. There was deathly silence outside. The dim, deep corridor looked eerie and ghostly because there was no lighting. No people, no sound at all. I steeled myself and walked toward the nurse's station. Both sides of the corridor were lined with closed wards, not a single sound. When I got to the nurse's station, it was completely empty. There was a landline on the desk. I picked up the receiver. No sound at all. The power was out. The hospital had actually lost power. Hospitals usually have backup circuits. Such a complete blackout would only happen in some major disaster. Just as I was about to return to the ward, rustling sounds came from the ward ahead, as if someone in slippers were shuffling around. I shivered and, summoning my courage, moved closer. The ward door was left ajar. The lock had been damaged, and a large padlock with a chain hung on the door. Because it wasn't the original lock, there was a palm-sized gap in the door. As soon as I leaned my face closer, a hand with grayish skin suddenly shot out through the crack in the door. I yanked my head back immediately, my heart pounding wildly, thudding painfully against my chest. That hand groped around frantically. Dirty fingernails, clearly defined knuckles, and a stench of decay. The half-open door kept slamming from the arm's movement, and hoarse gasping sounds came from inside the room, making my spine tingle. Probably because it had been triggered, a chain reaction began as all sorts of noises started coming from the wards on both sides of the corridor. The scraping of crawling, footsteps walking, mindless hoarse sounds. My mind went buzzing, and I immediately ran back. Adrenaline kicked my weakened body into action. I sprinted back to the ward, shut the door, and locked it. Then I dragged 2 chairs over to brace the door before I could finally catch my breath. Before I had even caught my breath, a thought flashed through my mind. The bathroom. This hospital room has a bathroom. The door has been closed the whole time. I haven't checked it yet. I took down the iron force stand and forced myself to move closer. I pressed my ear to the door and listened for a while. Inside was as quiet as a vacuum. I yanked the door open. A foul stench hit me in the face. By the light from the window, I saw a half-rotten corpse in the bathroom, with pale maggots writhing over it. I slammed the door shut, but the stench had already filled the entire room. I set down the force stand and lay back on the bed. A patient is still a patient. That short effort had exhausted all my strength. But now was not the time to rest. I needed to figure out what exactly was going on. How much time had passed since I blacked out while playing basketball? The sunlight outside the window was bright, like a summer afternoon, probably around 3 or 4 o'clock. All my personal belongings were gone. My phone and wallet were both gone. This was Beishan City's Second People's Hospital, A top-tier general hospital usually packed with people, yet now it was eerily quiet. Not only was there no one around, there were also unidentified creatures in the ward. There was even a rotting corpse in the bathroom. Looking back at the compressed biscuits and water on the bedside cabinet, I thought I understood. Someone had probably left them there on purpose. But if they left supplies, why didn't they leave a note? Or was it that the person no longer had time to leave any information? The eerie sounds were still echoing through the corridor. I dragged the metal bedside cabinet over too and used it to block the door. Even if the door was opened, it would buy me some buffer time. Until I figured out what was going on, I had no intention of leaving this room. What was happening in the corridor was far too bizarre. And there was a corpse right here in the room. This is a law-governed society. If there were a corpse, the police should have arrived long ago. Still, a corpse was safer than those bizarre creatures that could make sounds. Without any means of communication, I seemed to be the only living person left in the hospital. The things in the other rooms still looked human on the outside, but what they were inside was anyone's guess. I guessed that some kind of disease had probably broken out. But why was I fine? I couldn't figure it out. The sounds in the corridor grew more and more intense. Eventually, the floors above and below started making eerie noises as well. I could clearly hear the sound of nails scraping across the ceiling, along with that kind of wheezing strangled in the throat. Goosebumps crawled all over my body. I was terrified, but my reason was still intact. I quickly concluded that all these eerie disturbances were caused by sound. I had made a noise first, drawing the attention of the humanoid creature in that room. The noise it made triggered a chain reaction, causing all the things locked in rooms on this floor to become active, and then it spread to the 2 floors above and below. It seemed I had to avoid making noise as much as possible. I was relieved that those things were all locked inside the rooms. By this point, I already had a rough idea of what those humanoid creatures were, but I still needed to see one clearly with my own eyes to confirm it. I walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked outside. The room was on the 3rd floor. Outside was a dazzlingly green lawn with a path running through the middle. Beyond the grass was a stretch of concrete, glaring white under the bright sun. At the far end was the outpatient building. It should have been bustling with people, but all that met my eyes was the glare reflecting off the floor tiles. Not even a single sparrow was in sight. I pushed open the glass window and leaned my head outside. A foul odor came at me with the hot wind. It was exactly the same as the stench of the corpse in the bathroom. Were there rotting corpses outside too? It seemed the people in this hospital had either fled or died, and the dead had been left where they fell, with no one to collect the bodies. I remembered how to estimate time of death based on the degree of decomposition. Covering my mouth and nose with the pillowcase, I quickly pulled the door open for a look, then quickly shut it again. 2 days. The corpse had been dead for no more than 2 days. I had been unconscious for at least 2 days. The living people in the hospital had escaped at least 2 days ago too. A lot can happen in 2 days. But in a situation like this, many people would usually choose to flee back home. If I escape the hospital, I should be able to find survivors outside. Then I'll understand what exactly happened. As I was thinking, a sound came from outside the window, the scraping of slippers walking. I moved to the window and saw a person in a hospital gown slowly walking on the concrete. The steps were slow and swaying. One leg seemed broken, scraping against the ground with a noise. The figure was strangely twisted. One side of the body was stiff and immobile, and one arm had been torn off at the shoulder, hanging by only a layer of fascia and swinging. Even more horrifying, half the face had no skin, exposing ghastly white bone. The body was covered in dried blood, and the hospital gown was clawed open, revealing bite marks inside. As I was observing, the person suddenly stopped, turned its head at a bizarre angle, and faced the inpatient building with its half-rotted face. A pair of cloudy eyes stared fixedly at where I was, while its mouth let out a hoarse rasping sound. I sucked in a sharp breath and immediately hid behind the curtain. That terrifying face slowly turned back. The footsteps sounded again, growing farther and farther away until they disappeared. I looked outside again, and the figure was gone. This was the proof I needed. It retained a human form, but its movements were stiff and twisted. It was sensitive to sound, with vision almost reduced to 0. It mechanically made a sound as if its throat were being strangled. Its skin was bluish-gray, covered in wounds, bite marks, and livor mortis, yet it felt neither pain nor itch. Even fatal injuries posed no threat to that body. I had seen this kind of image many times in movies, but this was the first time I had seen it in real life. Zombies. Zombies that seek the presence of the living and feed on flesh and blood. Just like that, they suddenly burst into my life. Once I confirmed it was a zombie outbreak, I began racking my brains to recall everything I knew about zombies. The most critical rule: bites and scratches can infect you, so direct contact must be avoided. Second, to kill a zombie, you must destroy its brain. Otherwise, even if you cut off its neck, it can still bite. Third, if the person closest to you is infected, your first choice is to kill it, and your second choice is to stay away. You can't indulge in wishful thinking. Even if it was once your parents, children, or partner, once it becomes a zombie, it will still bite you. These three are ironclad rules and must be strictly followed. Besides these, there are rules yet to be verified. It's best not to go out at night, when zombies are most active. Food bitten by zombies cannot be eaten. After thinking it all through, I was actually more exhausted than after a game of basketball. The sky gradually darkened, and the entire city was pitch black, without a single light in sight. The whole city had fallen. As night deepened, all kinds of strange noises and howls came from all around, and the zombies grew more active in the dark. Footsteps kept echoing through the corridor downstairs, as if lost people were wandering back and forth. It seemed the hospital was already overrun with zombies. Luckily, the zombies on my floor were all locked in their rooms, otherwise I'd have had to barricade the door even more tightly. I have to leave this hospital as soon as possible. Food and water will run out soon, and with zombies all around, it isn't safe. It's already late, so I'll sleep first and prepare when I wake up. I checked the doors and windows, then returned to the hospital bed and fell asleep. I'm the kind of person who stays calm in the face of major events, so I actually slept quite well. At the first light of dawn, I woke up and started preparing. I took apart the force stand and removed a solid iron rod over a meter long. I ground it against the floor for an hour, sharpening it into a small point. As long as I aim for a zombie's eye socket or mouth, one strike can kill it. Then I made protective gear. I tore the bedsheet into thin strips and wrapped them around my cuffs and pant legs. The sleeves and pant legs of the hospital gown were too loose, leaving my arms and calves exposed, exactly the places most vulnerable to attack, so I carefully wrapped them with cloth strips. I tore the remaining quilt cover into long strips and braided them into a rope. After finishing all this, daylight had fully broken and the sun had risen. The sounds of zombies moving during the night gradually quieted down. As the morning light spread across the earth, the world slowly fell silent, as if all humanity had vanished, leaving only me behind. I looked outside from the window and mapped out an escape route. There would definitely be all kinds of variables during the escape. What I needed was to ultimately reach the ideal location. As long as I wasn't injured or bitten along the way, that would be the most perfect outcome. Eat the remaining food. Escaping requires strength, so I can't be stingy with food. If something goes wrong during the escape, there is no point in saving it anyway. I quickly finished the food and drank the last mouthful of water. Now there was no food or water left. With no way out except to risk everything for survival, I had to leave and could not turn back. I used a pillowcase to pack toilet paper, a towel, and some small items, and finally put in the empty mineral water bottle as well. The empty bottle weighed almost nothing, yet it could be used as a cup. I tied the pillowcase onto my back and tucked the sharpened iron rod into my waist. Then I picked up the rope braided from the quilt cover and tied it to the window frame. After tugging on it a few times to make sure the rope was securely fastened, I grabbed it and climbed out the window. To avoid going through the corridor and down the stairs, he planned to use the rope to go directly from upstairs down to the grass outside. There was no other way. Although the zombies on the third floor were locked inside the wards, the zombies on the other floors were roaming freely outside. If I got blocked by zombies in the narrow corridor, it would be a dead end. So he had no choice but to take the risk and use the rope he had braided to descend directly down the outer wall. Fortunately, there was a drain pipe on the exterior wall, and at intervals there were protrusions that could be stepped on, ensuring that every step down had somewhere to place his foot. The rope was actually only there as an aid, adding some extra safety. Qin Muyang dared say that someone with strong climbing ability could even go down directly without a rope. The third floor was not that high. In less than 10 minutes, Qin Muyang was standing on the soft grass below. The moment one foot touched the grass, he immediately looked around in all directions. And only after confirming that there were no zombies moving nearby, did he set his other foot down and let go of the rope in his hand. He had long been prepared anyway. If there was danger after coming down, he would immediately turn around and climb back up. Only by knowing when to bend and when to stand firm can you stay alive. Fortunately, the hospital grounds were fairly safe during the daytime. At least, as far as the eye could see, there was no sign of any zombies. It was just that the faint stench of decay lingering in the air made his head feel a little heavy and dizzy. And the weather was very hot. Even though the sun had only just been up for a short while, he could already clearly feel a scorching heat. This year's summer had come earlier than usual and was even hotter than in previous years. Qin Muyang pulled the towel out of the pillowcase and wiped the sweat from his forehead, then simply covered his mouth and nose with it, making a simple mask to block out the unpleasant smells from outside. In any case, it was better than nothing. At least those putrid odors were not as piercing as before. While making these preparations, Qin Muyang kept walking forward. He was going to cross the grass and head straight for the side gate of the hospital. He had already planned this route back in the ward, because this was a route with relatively fewer people in the hospital, so the number of zombies would definitely be relatively smaller as well. At a time like this, there was no way he could choose to leave through the hospital's main entrance. Although he had not seen what the situation at the main entrance was like, Qin Muyang could imagine zombies packed tightly together there. This was a large general hospital, and the flow of people was unimaginable. After crossing the grass and walking along the concrete road for a few minutes, he encountered nothing on the way. He did not even see a single bird. In the end, Qin Muyang stepped onto a tree-lined path, the very trail that led to the side gate. After turning a corner, several white single-story houses suddenly appeared, half hidden among the green trees. From a distance, they looked a bit like warehouses. This did not match what Qin Muyang had observed earlier from upstairs. Qin Muyang was sure he had not taken the wrong path. He had observed from upstairs earlier, and there was only this one road leading this way. But when he was upstairs, he had not seen these few white houses. It seemed that because the third floor was not very high, these houses had been hidden by the shade of the trees, so he had not noticed them. If there were buildings, then there was a good chance there were people. Or rather, zombies. Qin Muyang slowly drew out the homemade iron rod from his waist and gripped it in his hand. He had no other choice but to bite the bullet and pass through here. In the entire hospital, this was the only safest route. If he could not even get through here, then the other routes were out of the question. Taking a deep breath and trying hard to calm himself, he worked out in his mind how to thrust the iron rod and how to dodge zombie attacks. Qin Muyang gradually calmed down. Holding the iron rod, he slowly approached the white houses. Even through the towel covering his nose and mouth, Qin Muyang could feel the stench growing stronger and stronger. It seemed that there were either zombies or rotting corpses by the white houses. Otherwise, it would not smell worse the closer he got. Sure enough, when he was still more than 10 meters away from the white houses, Qin Muyang saw several already rotting corpses laid side by side on the ground over there. From the traces at the scene, it could be seen that those corpses had originally been put in body bags, but for some unknown reason, all the body bags had been torn open, and the corpses were posed in some strange postures. Some of the corpses even had bite marks on them, with a great deal of muscle tissue missing. Qin Muyang inferred that the corpses had probably been piled up here and left unhandled, then torn at by stray dogs or similar animals. Soon, a black dog slipped past beneath the shade of the trees, confirming Qin Muyang's guess. He also saw the sign erected outside the white houses and realized that these white, warehouse-like one-story buildings were actually this hospital's morgue. If he had accidentally wandered here under normal circumstances, Qin Muyang would definitely have cursed his bad luck. But in the current situation, these dead bodies actually seemed somewhat lovable to him instead, because at least corpses would not attack people like zombies. With these corpses piled outside, it fully proved just how many patients had died at this hospital at the time. So many that the morgue had been unable to take them all in at once, and they could only be temporarily placed outside. Qin Muyang tightened his grip on the iron rod in his hand and walked with extreme caution. On the one hand, he was on guard against the possibility of stray dogs suddenly rushing out from the shadows to attack him. On the other hand, he was also wary that zombies might be wandering nearby. There were too many blind spots here, and who knew whether something might be hiding in the dark waiting for him. All these corpses had rotted, and with no food, the stray dogs might really attack living passersby. Qin Muyang had previously seen videos online of large packs of stray dogs attacking pedestrians. He went around the corpses in front of him and walked to the front of the morgue. Only then did he see that the small square at the front was also packed with densely placed corpses. Those corpses just now had only been put over there because there was no more room in the square. The corpses had all rotted and were stinking, with pale maggots crawling all over them. As soon as Qin Muyang approached, the flies on the corpses rose with a loud buzz, forming a vast black mass covering the sky, like a dark cloud dropping right in front of him. As the flies took off, the stench hit Qin Muyang so hard that he retched, and the scene before his eyes made his whole body break out in goosebumps. Even a bucket of water with stinky socks soaked in it for a month and then a dead rat falling in and rotting into soup would not be 1/10 as foul as what was before him. Even though Qin Muyang considered himself widely experienced and no stranger to all kinds of stenches, but the scene before him still shocked him. He was someone who could tolerate several pairs of stinky feet in a dorm. Carefully stepping over these foul-smelling corpses, Qin Muyang continued toward the hospital's side entrance. He did not let his guard down. Instead, he became even more cautious. After all, he had just passed the morgue, yet nothing had happened, which made it all feel somewhat unreal. When something is abnormal, there must be something behind it. Sure enough, after moving forward another 10+ meters, the stray dog that had just slipped away to the side actually came back, and behind it followed more than a dozen mongrels, all skin and bones and glaring viciously. Generally speaking, Chinese rural dogs are a rather loyal and honest breed. But these dogs were probably born into life as strays, had never once filled their stomachs, and had always been chased away by humans. So now they were very hostile toward people. The moment they saw Qin Muyang, the whole pack bared their teeth and let out low growls. Qin Muyang was rendered speechless on the spot. You dogs have no honor in a fight. You actually went back to call for backup. Qin Muyang held the iron rod across his chest, taking a stance that allowed for quick attack and defense, his eyes fixed tightly on the oncoming pack. The dogs, meanwhile, were also probing and did not dare pounce directly. At the end of the day, dogs are still dogs, not smart enough, not disciplined enough. The pack only growled at Qin Muyang and did not dare charge up. Two of the dogs even growled while tucking their tails between their hind legs and secretly backing away. At a glance, Qin Muyang could tell this pack was a bit cowardly, and his confidence rose by several degrees. He directly swung the iron rod in his hand and began driving the pack back. Sure enough, the moment the iron rod moved, these dogs either dropped to the ground or tucked their tails and retreated. Only a few dogs seemed not particularly afraid of Qin Muyang. Those few happened to be the skinniest. They were probably starving for too long, and their desire to eat had overridden everything else, so they were not afraid of the iron rod in Qin Muyang's hand at all. But with only a few dogs like that, Qin Muyang did not find it troublesome. No matter how ferocious these dogs looked, it was obvious they had no organization and no plan whatsoever, so they could be taken down one by one with ease. Thinking this, Qin Muyang directly swung the iron rod in his hand at the lead black dog's head. The rod whistled through the air and met the black dog as it lunged. There was only a dull thud as the strike landed cleanly, sending the black dog flying more than 2 meters before it hit the ground and kicked up dust. The black dog whimpered twice, its hind legs kicked several times, and then it lost all signs of life. Seeing this, some of the remaining dogs turned and ran, while others bared their teeth and charged straight in. Gripping the iron rod, Qin Muyang either lashed out, struck hard, or simply thrust it diagonally forward. In less than 2 minutes, several dogs were already on the ground crying out in misery. The rest were scared out of their wits, tails tucked as they ran back, low whimpers coming from their mouths. He had never expected that the weapon he had carefully crafted to deal with zombies would first be used against a pack of stray dogs. Beating instead of buying, stabbing instead of kidnapping. Qin Muyang casually wiped the iron rod in his hand on the nearby grass, then continued toward the side entrance. Unexpectedly, although those dogs had clearly already run far away, they suddenly turned back again and charged straight at Qin Muyang, moving even faster than before and looking even more ferocious. Strangely, as these dogs lunged over, they were also letting out low, mournful whimpers from their mouths. They seemed to have developed an extreme fear of something. Qin Muyang's heart skipped a beat, realizing these dogs were not chasing him. They had encountered something on the road and had no choice but to run back. What could have scared the dogs this badly? It certainly wasn't his own pose of carrying an iron rod. Qin Muyang already had the answer in his heart. Sure enough, just as expected, a few swaying figures appeared in the sunlight in the distance. Those stiff bodies, twisted gaits, and the strong stench of rot all told Qin Muyang that he had finally encountered real, living zombies, and several of them at once. Suddenly faced with so many zombies, Qin Muyang instantly forgot all the moves and techniques he had imagined in the hospital room for dealing with zombies. He had only one thought in his mind: run. He had to run even faster than these dogs. Even the dogs were afraid of zombies, let alone a solitary human like him. When seeing zombies on screen, he had no idea how many times he had imagined what he would do if he encountered them, certain he would be even more capable than the protagonist. Only when he truly faced them himself could he feel that terrifying sensation. They were beasts utterly devoid of even a trace of emotion. No, even more terrifying than beasts. Beasts have things they fear, zombies do not. Zombies only advance without end, advance. Feed. Only when their heads are pierced and they completely lose all signs of life will they stop. Looking at those gray-white, cloudy eyes without pupils, and that bloodless skin, while their throats worked mechanically to produce hoarse huffing sounds. Qin Muyang's feet moved swiftly. Those dogs also ran for their lives at high speed beside him. But because they had been starving for so long, their physical abilities had declined, and they were gradually left behind by Qin Muyang. Before long, Qin Muyang heard the mournful cries of dogs from behind him. Unable to resist, he turned his head to look, just in time to see one dog being grabbed by a zombie and violently torn at. Its foul, reeking mouth opened and bit directly into the dog's neck. In an instant, fresh blood seeped from between the zombie's teeth, dripping onto the ground. The zombies arriving from behind also crowded around, 3 or 4 pairs of bluish-gray hands clawing and tearing at the dog. Before long, the barking gradually died down, leaving only heavy panting. A few seconds later, even the panting was gone. The dog had already been disemboweled by several zombies, with even the intestines and organs from its belly pulled out. Blood was splattered all over the ground, and the smell of blood mixed with the rotting stench from the zombies was carried over by the hot summer wind. Qin Muyang's stomach churned, his throat bobbed, and he dry-heaved twice. Several zombies stayed behind to feast on the dog's corpse, while more new zombies caught up from behind. Qin Muyang no longer lingered and continued running forward. Behind him, he could from time to time hear the dog's wails, and the wind also carried over waves of the smell of blood. As he ran, his scalp tingled with dread. How could something like this happen in real life? Qin Muyang still felt that everything was somewhat unreal. But the things chasing after him from behind were no illusion, and he could only steel himself and flee for his life. At first his stamina could still hold out, but the zombies behind him pursued relentlessly. Although they were not fast, even leisurely to some extent, Qin Muyang's speed was slowly dropping. He was a patient who had not yet recovered to begin with, and after being chased and running for so long, he simply couldn't run anymore and could only walk quickly while gasping for breath. Moreover, Qin Muyang realized that during his escape, he had gradually deviated from the route he had originally planned. Sure enough, things never go exactly according to plan. There was no way for him to force his way back onto the route he had originally planned. After all, this hospital was huge, and he wasn't familiar with its layout at all. And on some paths, there were even several zombies blocking the way. When they saw Qin Muyang passing by, those zombies quickly joined the pursuit as well. At present, there were already 20 or 30 zombies following behind him, and the number was still increasing. Earlier, when he looked out from the ward, he couldn't see at all where the zombies were hiding. At night, because there were no lights, he could only hear the zombies' roars and all kinds of noises, but couldn't see what they actually looked like. Now Qin Muyang understood. So during the day, these zombies were all lazing around in dark places, waiting to chase after prey when it appeared. While avoiding zombies that might suddenly appear at any moment, he was also searching for the direction he should go. No matter what, he had to leave this hospital first. Beishan City Second People's Hospital was a large comprehensive hospital, covering an area of tens of thousands of square meters. And there was no telling how many patients, medical staff, and others were inside. By now, they had either already evacuated or turned into zombies. Aside from a few entrances and exits, the entire hospital was surrounded by walls 1 or 2 meters high. Qin Muyang knew full well that being trapped inside the hospital would only make things worse and worse, so he had no choice but to run toward the wall. Following the wall, he would eventually find an exit. The sun had already risen high, and the air was gradually becoming hot and stuffy. The small amount of food Qin Muyang had eaten in the morning had long since been digested, and his lips were starting to crack a little. Right now, he desperately needed to stop, rest, eat, and replenish water. However, the current situation was that he could neither stop moving nor had any food or water to consume. He had imagined earlier that after leaving the hospital, he would quickly be able to find food and water at a roadside shop, but now that seemed like nothing more than wishful thinking. At this moment, Qin Muyang would already be satisfied just to escape these zombies safely. After turning past a tree-lined path, Qin Muyang looked up and saw rows upon rows of people standing on the road ahead, and an intense sense of oppression hit him instantly. Those people were all wearing the same patient gowns as him, standing motionless in place in a neurotic manner. The noise Qin Muyang made attracted their attention, and almost in an instant, that whole group turned their heads toward him at the same time. And so, Qin Muyang saw the most horrifying scene of his life. Every one of those turned faces had ashen bluish-gray skin, clouded eyes, and a great many of them bore all kinds of wounds on their faces. Some had a dark bluish-black, deep bite mark on their cheek. Some had half their face torn away, exposing the bones inside, with maggots crawling in and out. And some had an eyeball hanging out, connected only by a thin strand, swinging against the face. There were even some whose entire face was gone, leaving only a skull-like head, with two deep, blackened eye sockets that made you feel like you'd have nightmares after just one look. With so many terrifying faces staring at him like that, Qin Muyang only felt his scalp go numb, and goosebumps rose all over him in an instant. What kind of fellow patients were these? They were clearly a group of zombies. Qin Muyang was completely numb with shock. Roar, huff huff, heh, heh. The zombies let out excited sounds and lunged at Qin Muyang. These zombies had not seen fresh flesh and blood for a long time. With a living person who could run and jump suddenly appearing, the brutality and bloodlust in their nature were immediately awakened. Qin Muyang cursed several times under his breath, dragged his exhausted body through a sharp turn in an instant, and jumped straight into the greenbelt to flee for his life, finally escaping the predicament of wolves in front and pursuers behind. But the two groups of zombies in front and behind directly merged into one, turning into a huge wave that pursued him relentlessly from behind. And because there were too many zombies, the commotion they made grew louder and louder, attracting many scattered zombies from the surrounding area as well. This made Qin Muyang's escape route increasingly difficult. The plants in the greenbelt were growing lush in this season, tall and short. All were thick and verdant, nearly tripping Qin Muyang. Several times he staggered a few steps, but quickly regained his footing. This was thanks to Qin Muyang's advantage as an athletic student. His sense of balance was better than that of ordinary people, which happened to save his life at this moment. If he accidentally fell in this greenbelt, the zombies behind him would quickly catch up and turn him into a delicious takeaway meal. These zombies normally wandered around looking for food all over the place. When had they ever seen someone like Qin Muyang deliver himself right to their door? But as time passed bit by bit, Qin Muyang felt that he was already nearing the limit of his stamina. The zombies behind him followed closely, only a step away from Qin Muyang. Suddenly, a zombie in a clump of shrubs ahead howled and lunged at Qin Muyang. Qin Muyang immediately sidestepped to avoid it, but his movement inevitably slowed for a moment because of it, and the zombies behind him rushed right up in front of him. At the very front were two patients in hospital gowns, their faces ferocious, repeatedly making teeth-grating sounds as they lunged at Qin Muyang's face. Qin Muyang's heart tightened, and for an instant he was a little flustered, but he quickly calmed down again. For someone like him who often competed with others in sports, his mental fortitude was naturally better. Although he would panic when faced with an emergency, he could adjust his mindset in an instant. He first lowered his body slightly, then immediately pulled out the solid iron rod with a pointed tip tied at his waist. Gripping the iron rod tightly with both hands, he thrust it forward toward the zombie's eye socket. He only felt a thoroughly satisfying sense of penetration as the iron rod in his hands instantly stabbed into the zombie's eye socket. Puffed, accompanied by the sound of flesh being pierced, some sticky, filthy liquid flowed out along the iron rod. This was what it felt like to kill a zombie. This was the scene he had seen in movies. This was the thrill that so many people pursued in their fantasies. The zombie instantly lost all signs of life and fell onto the grass with a bang. Qin Muyang quickly withdrew the iron rod and stabbed out again. Because the two zombies had lunged one after the other, after stabbing the first zombie to death, he no longer had time to aim at the second one. So this time he did not hit the eye socket and instead stabbed the zombie in the cheek. The feeling in his hands was not as thoroughly satisfying as last time. The jarring resistance made Qin Muyang take a step back, nearly falling to the ground. The zombies howled as they surged forward one after another, and Qin Muyang immediately withdrew the iron rod and stabbed again. This time he finally sent the pointed tip of the iron rod accurately into the zombie's eye socket. There was another pft, and sticky liquid instantly spurted out, utterly disgusting. Qin Muyang did not dare to linger in the fight, and immediately pulled out the iron rod. Because he did not know whether contact with this slime would infect him with the zombie virus as well, Qin Muyang wiped the slime off the iron rod on the grass with a backhand motion. Tucking the iron rod back at his waist once more, his feet were already moving quickly. Escape. I have to escape from here. If I can't shake off these zombies, then even if I run myself to death, it will be useless. Looking up, ahead was the hospital's inpatient building. He had just left here this morning. After running around in a circle, he had ended up back by the inpatient building. But Qin Muyang knew he absolutely could not hide inside the inpatient building. Not to mention that the restless zombies inside the inpatient building were a huge, unstable factor. He was still facing the threat of having no food or water. Therefore, even if there were no zombies inside the inpatient building, hiding in there would not be a long-term solution. He still needed to leave and search for supplies. The horde of zombies behind him kept chasing relentlessly, and Qin Muyang continued forward, panting heavily. After going around the inpatient building, the number of zombies behind him increased by quite a lot. What kind of start is this? Beginning on hell difficulty. Qin Muyang felt that he was a bit unlucky. At this rate, if he still couldn't find a way to escape the hospital smoothly, he was probably going to lose his life. He couldn't just die like this. That would be too unjust. As Qin Muyang ran, he encouraged himself. He had studied hard for more than 10 years and had only enjoyed 1 year of college life. He hadn't even started working yet to help ease his parents' burden. If he died now, that would be far too unlucky. The moment he thought of his parents, another surge of strength burst out from within Qin Muyang, and he actually threw the zombies behind him several more meters away. What he thought of was not how, if he died, he could repay his parents. What he thought was that, judging from the current situation, the zombie virus had probably already spread through many cities. He had no idea how his parents were doing now. No matter what, he had to stay alive and see his parents. Even if they had already turned into zombies, he had to see them alive, and if dead, see their bodies. No, they wouldn't turn into zombies. They lived in the countryside, where the population was sparse. They wouldn't turn into zombies. As Qin Muyang calculated in his mind, he looked up. Several medium-height landscaping trees appeared ahead, and behind the trees was the hospital wall. There was no road left. When Qin Muyang saw the towering wall, he was not surprised at all. Instead, he felt as if things had finally stabilized. He hadn't run in panic into this dead end by mistake. Rather, he had planned from the start to find a wall suitable for climbing. This place was just right. The not-too-tall landscaping trees could bear a person's weight. He could climb directly onto the tree, use the trunk leaning against the wall to jump onto the wall, and then leave the hospital. This was much safer than taking the hospital's main gate or side gate or anything like that, and he wouldn't run into zombies blocking and chasing him. He had already observed that these zombies could not do difficult movements like climbing tree trunks. So leaving the hospital from here would let him shake off the group of zombies behind him. In the blink of an eye, Qin Muyang had already reached the side of the landscaping tree. He turned around and looked at the dense mass of zombies behind him. There were at least 80, if not 100. If he were caught by that mass of zombies, he would probably be chewed straight into mush, without even getting the chance to be infected and turn into a zombie. Who had ever seen minced meat turn into a zombie? Qin Muyang quickly began climbing the tree. When he was little, he got beaten plenty of times for climbing trees in the countryside, but that didn't stop him from always climbing up to pick fruit and raid beehives. Thank goodness he hadn't been discouraged by those beatings back then. Otherwise, there was no way he could have developed such a miraculous tree climbing skill. In just a few quick moves, Qin Muyang climbed onto the tree fork. Below the tree, zombies had already surrounded it. Having already lost the ability to climb, these zombies could only crowd around below the tree and howl. As they jostled and shoved one another, the landscaping tree began to shake violently. The leaves rustled noisily, stimulating the zombies to gather here and launch even fiercer shoving and crashing attacks against the tree. Qin Muyang nearly lost his grip and broke out in a cold sweat. If he fell into the horde of zombies below, he would truly die without leaving a whole corpse. He quickly climbed toward the tree trunk pressed against the wall and transferred himself onto the wall. Only after stepping onto the solid wall did Qin Muyang let out a sigh of relief, feeling that he had been saved. At least he no longer had to play a winding game of hide-and-seek with this group of zombies outside. That feeling of running for his life kept his nerves taut, like being slowly dismembered. Those zombies were still crazily besieging the tree below, apparently not noticing that their prey had already jumped onto the wall. Qin Muyang did not hurry either, and took a moment to catch his breath on the wall. After resting for 5 or 6 minutes, he finally began to look over the situation outside the wall. Pushing aside the dense leaves and looking beyond the wall, he saw a silent alley outside, one side of it running along the hospital wall, while the other side was lined with small restaurants selling all kinds of breakfast foods and shabby little inns. The doors of these small restaurants all stood wide open, with tables and chairs strewn all over the floor, and dried bloodstains could be seen on the ground and walls. Even the road outside was spattered with blood. It was hard to imagine what exactly had happened in this alley at the time. In any case, it must have been a horrific scene. After observing for a moment and finding that there was not a single zombie in the alley, Qin Muyang slowly crouched down and carefully jumped off the wall into the alley. Even through the wall, he could still hear the various sounds made by those zombies inside. Qin Muyang shook his head and left those sounds behind him. The alley was filled with the kind of putrid smell found in the hospital, though the odor was not as strong as it was inside the hospital. Qin Muyang frowned and walked straight toward those restaurants. He wanted to look for food and water inside them. In this kind of restaurant, bottled drinks in glass bottles would usually be displayed on the dining tables for sale, and those bottled drinks were Qin Muyang's target. However, his plan came to nothing, as not a single table or chair in the small restaurants was standing upright. They were all toppled haphazardly on the floor. The glass bottled drinks had fallen to the ground, the bottles shattered, and their contents had long since spilled out. After the spilled drinks dried on the ground, only some sugar remained. Stepping on it made the soles of his shoes stick and slap against the floor, and he could see many ants and tiny flying insects stuck to the sugar as well, forming patch after patch of black stains on the ground. Interwoven with the black stains left after the blood had dried, they created a nauseating scene across the floor. There were even more disgusting sights, but Qin Muyang simply pretended not to see them. Amid the chaos, he searched for anything he could make use of, but too much time had already passed. These cramped little shops could not hold much to begin with, and after the chaotic looting and frantic escape, even less was left. Qin Muyang had originally wanted to find a knife as a backup weapon, but after searching several shops, he found none. They might be small restaurants, but surely not to the point of not having even a single cleaver. So the result was obvious. The knives in the shops had been taken away. Most likely, when the zombie outbreak happened, someone rushed out gripping a cleaver. It was also possible that after the zombie outbreak, someone had already come to search the place. There were no corpses or traces of zombies in this alley. Otherwise, Qin Muyang might have been able to scavenge something. He went through several restaurants in a row, and every one of them had tables and chairs tossed about in a mess, with bloodstains all over the floor and traces left by spilled drinks. Just as he was about to walk out of the alley, he found a bottle of bottled juice that had miraculously survived in the third-to-last shop. Under normal circumstances, Qin Muyang wouldn't even spare this kind of juice a glance. It was nothing but various colorings, flavorings, and white sugar mixed together, with barely anything to do with real fruit juice. But at this moment, to him, this blended juice was practically the water of immortality, and he could hardly wait to pour it straight into his mouth. He braced the bottle mouth against an overturned small square table nearby and slapped downward with his hand. The cap popped right off and fell to the ground. Qin Muyang raised the glass bottle to his mouth and gulped it down in big swallows, draining a 500-milliliter bottle of juice in one go. After finishing it, Qin Muyang didn't feel any less thirsty, but he did feel a little better than before. And the juice was high in sugar, so it could also replenish some energy. Qin Muyang casually grabbed a small stool and sat down, planning to rest for a while before continuing on. At that moment, he felt a faint pain at the back of his head again, and he started to feel a little dizzy. It was probably because he had been so focused on running for his life just now that he had overexerted himself. That amount of exercise would have been nothing to his former self, but for him now, still not fully recovered, it was a considerable burden. After sitting for more than 10 minutes, Qin Muyang finally felt a bit lighter all over. Next, he planned to leave the alley and go take a look out on the main street. One bottle of juice was never going to be enough. The weather was too hot. He needed to replenish a large amount of water, and he also needed food to fill his stomach. It was already nearing noon, and it would soon be the hottest time of the day. He needed to find food and a water source, and shelter from the midday heat in a more comfortable place. With that thought, Qin Muyang stood up and walked toward the outside of the alley. He wasn't familiar with this part of the city at all. He had no idea what Main Street lay outside or what it looked like, so he could only take it as it came. From south to north, he had come to Beishan City to attend school for a year, and the only area he was familiar with was the district where his school was located. But Beishan City had 5 districts. It was a big city. As for the district he was in now, he had only ever come here to play ball with students from Petroleum University, so he could be said to know absolutely nothing about this area. First find food and water, then get a more detailed map. Qin Muyang planned as he walked. Looking up, he realized he had already walked out of the alley and arrived on the broad street outside. The scene on the street was even more horrifying. Under the glaring white sunlight, he could see vehicles crashed into one another everywhere, almost completely blocking the road. The car crashes had probably caused fires, and signs of burning and smoke blackening were visible. The ground was piled with charred corpses, giving off a stench mixed with burnt and rotten smells. Qin Muyang tightened the cloth covering his mouth and nose again, although he knew it was useless. The smells he was going to smell would still reach him, and the bacteria he was going to inhale would still slip in through the gaps in the cloth. It was nothing more than psychological comfort. Without that layer of cloth blocking things, it would feel as if his mouth were in direct contact with those corpses. Ever since his middle school teacher said that molecules are constantly in motion, Qin Muyang had understood that when you smell something, it proves that those molecules have already entered your body. If you smell something foul while taking a dump, then poop molecules have actually gone into your nose, right? Qin Muyang stopped looking at those corpses and shifted his gaze elsewhere. Along the roadside, all kinds of trash were piled up, and glittering shards of glass reflected a harsh light. Those were traces left behind after people had looted and smashed things at will. One can imagine how turbulent and unstable this city was at the time. People were wildly celebrating the arrival of the apocalypse, doing things they had once wanted to do but had never dared to do. Kind, cautious, or timid people hid behind their windows, watching the city fall apart. In Qin Muyang's mind appeared swarms of zombies, panicked crowds, and the figures of those active troublemakers smashing, looting, and burning. He could almost still hear the screams, cries, and roars in his ears, along with the howls of zombies, some inexplicable wild laughter, and people rationally and calmly directing everyone on how to flee. Qin Muyang let out a sigh. His hearing and sense of smell were both very sharp, and sometimes based on those sensations, his mind would automatically construct a plausible scene. Although it did not necessarily recreate what the scene had truly been like at the time, it could still be 7 or 8 parts accurate. Sometimes he really hated this talent of his, because it made him see dark and terrifying scenes. He had heard that this was actually a kind of innate profiling ability, but Qin Muyang had never tried hard to get to the bottom of it. In life, many people actually have this kind of ability and can even apply it in their work. For example, a writer's sensitivity when capturing inspiration, or a detective's vigilance when looking for clues at a crime scene. Qin Muyang had no intention of developing this ability of his. He only wanted to live a simple life. His dream was to return to his hometown after graduating from university and take the exam to become a PE teacher, living a simple and stable life, while also putting his parents' minds at ease. That was also why he majored in physical education at university. But now, looking at the scenes before him, that dream would probably be hard to realize. All around him was wrapped in a strange silence. Qin Muyang had never heard this city so quiet. Every time he went out, there was either the rumble of heavy traffic or the clamor of endless crowds. The current silence was like the calm before a storm, making Qin Muyang's heart pound uncontrollably. The quieter it was, the stranger this street seemed. Either every living thing on this street was dead, or something was quietly hiding in the dark on purpose without making a sound. He had to leave the street quickly. Qin Muyang could not help quickening his pace, his steps making the ground rustle softly. He deliberately kept his footsteps light and swift even as he moved quickly, making as little noise as possible. After all, in such a quiet environment, whoever made a sound would be a living target. This street was lined with grand hotels that provided high-quality lodging and meals, the exact opposite of the scene in that alley just now. People who came to a major hospital like Beishan City's Second People's Hospital for treatment fell into 2 groups. One group was the wealthy. Even when seeking medical care, they demanded the best food and accommodation, and they would choose to stay on this street. The other group was poor people with serious illnesses, who had exhausted their family fortunes to come to a big hospital for treatment and could only eat and stay in cramped, filthy little alleys. Qin Muyang was an exception, based on his experience. He should have been brought to the Second People's Hospital by ambulance after collapsing on the sports field. Looking at the upscale hotels by the street, Qin Muyang knew full well that he could not go inside to look for what he needed. The hotel doors all stood wide open, and inside were spacious hotel lobbies. If there were zombies inside, their numbers would be enormous. With no lights, the direction of the hotel lobbies was now a pitch-black void. Qin Muyang had no need to take such a risk for food. In hotels like these, although there was food, most of it was either pre-packaged or fresh food. The power had been out for so long that this food had long since rotted, and it would be hard to find anything still well preserved. On the contrary, places like convenience stores and supermarkets were more likely than restaurants and hotels to have food and water. However, he could only go to smaller convenience stores or supermarkets. Because a large space and abundant goods meant there was usually heavy foot traffic, more people also meant more zombies. So Qin Muyang focused only on small shops. But there were no such small shops on this street, and because it was too quiet, Qin Muyang felt himself growing more and more uneasy. It was already noon, and the blazing sun beat down on his head. He was long since drenched in sweat, his patient gown clinging sticky to his body, and his vision was starting to swim a little. He was still too weak. All kinds of debris were piled up on the street, making it much harder for Qin Muyang to move forward. He struggled past several cars that had crashed together and burned until only their steel frames remained, then picked his way forward among some charred corpses, searching for places to step. At that moment, he suddenly spotted a canopy jutting out not far ahead. It looked like it belonged to a cafe or something similar, and several high-backed chairs lay overturned beneath it. When he got closer, it was indeed a cafe with large floor-to-ceiling windows. He did not dare go into the nearby shops to avoid the scorching midday sun, but resting for a while beneath a roadside canopy like this was fine. Qin Muyang quickly moved under the canopy and casually grabbed a chair, set it upright, and sat down. Although he could still feel the stifling heat in the air, the exposed skin no longer had that scorched, burning sting from before. But before he had even caught his breath, the corner of his eye suddenly caught something moving inside the cafe window. The movement was slight, but it still sent a chill down Qin Muyang's spine. He slowly turned his head, and then saw that the cafe was actually packed with zombies, at least 20 or 30 of them. The zombies stood blankly inside the shop, moving their bodies at an extremely slow pace. So slow that if you were not paying attention, you would not notice at all. Qin Muyang's head buzzed, and he thought to himself that luckily these zombies had not noticed him. He quietly stood up, preparing to leave the cafe entrance. As if possessed, he carefully examined all the storefronts along the street. Through the glass, he could clearly see that almost every single shop was densely packed with zombies. Luckily, he had been moving lightly and carefully the whole way and had not made any loud noise. He had always been very cautious. The zombies all stood there blankly, their bodies swaying slightly, without any big movements. It seemed they did not like such intense sunlight very much, so they had specifically hidden indoors to hibernate. Qin Muyang suddenly thought of some information he had previously overlooked. When he woke up in the hospital yesterday and looked outside from the ward window, he saw nothing at all. It was not until near dusk that the zombies slowly came out to move around. And this morning, when he was chased by zombies in the hospital, it was also because he had alarmed the zombies hiding in the shade of the trees. He had actually overlooked such important information while fleeing for his life. The streets empty, eerily quiet stillness was not because no living creatures existed. It was precisely because there were too many zombies, all crammed into the shops on both sides of the street, that such deathly silence had resulted. Because the moment any sound was made, the zombies on both sides would come pouring out in a frenzy and quickly take over the street. By then, probably not even a rat would be able to break through the layers of encirclement. Perhaps in an upstairs room of one of the roadside hotels, someone was hiding behind the curtains watching Qin Muyang cross the street, yet unable to make any sound to warn him that this street seemed calm, but was actually fraught with danger. It was no wonder Qin Muyang had walked so far without noticing the zombies behind the glass. One reason was that the glass was a bit reflective. Once Qin Muyang saw that the signs above the shops were not for a mini-mart or convenience store, he would no longer carefully observe what was behind the glass. Another reason was that he had been walking under the blazing sun the whole time. After his eyes were stimulated by the intense light, when he looked toward the shaded areas of the shops on both sides, he simply could not see clearly. When a person suddenly moves from a brightly lit environment into a relatively dim interior, there is a brief moment of vision loss before it gradually recovers. To see everything clearly again would take several minutes. As for how Qin Muyang had just managed to notice the zombies behind the coffee shop's glass window, it was thanks to having stayed for a short while in the shade under the awning, which allowed his vision to recover somewhat. When he stepped back into the strong light, he could not help narrowing his eyes. However, he quickly adapted again to the fierce sunlight and continued forward despite the heat. This time, he walked even more cautiously than before, afraid of alerting any zombie hiding in the roadside shops. Alerting even one zombie would definitely trigger a chain reaction, and then he really would have no chance of escape. With his eyes once again unable to make out the scene inside the street-side shops under the glaring sun, Qin Muyang gradually relaxed again. Maybe this was what the saying "out of sight, out of mind" meant. More than 10 minutes later, Qin Muyang finally reached an intersection. Looking out, the city was a scene of utter devastation. The street straight ahead was no different from the place he had just walked through. Not even a ghost of a figure could be seen. The zombies were still hiding in the shops on both sides of the road, but the two streets stretching left and right from the intersection looked different. Both sides were in shadow, with no glaring sun on the streets, and he could see small groups of zombies wandering slowly and aimlessly, letting out low growls from their throats. At that moment, Qin Muyang felt extremely grateful for the cars crashed together by the roadside. It was precisely because there were so many cars piled up at the intersection, completely blocking the street, that the wandering zombies on the cross streets were prevented from drifting directly to the intersection. Otherwise, if those zombies wandered to the intersection and casually made some noise, they might alert the zombies hiding in the shops along the vertical street. Then Qin Muyang would be in danger. He kept himself from making any unnecessary sound and quickly climbed over several cars that had been crushed into scrap metal. Crack. He did not know which part of a car he had stepped on, but it made a crisp snapping sound. Qin Muyang lost his balance and pitched forward, immediately catching himself with his hands. He had nearly fallen face first onto the twisted wreckage. He thought to himself, that was close. He had almost been disfigured by a piece of protruding sheet metal below. Suddenly, a pair of cloudy eyes appeared from the pile of twisted metal below. The moment their eyes met, Qin Muyang understood that it was a zombie trapped among those cars, just about to open its mouth and let out its signature roar before attacking him. Sweat broke out on Qin Muyang's forehead. Reaching behind his waist, he yanked out the iron rod made from the force stand and drove it straight into that cloudy eye. Mucus spurted out, like a water balloon being punctured. The zombie instantly fell silent. Although the commotion was small, it still attracted another wandering zombie nearby. Qin Muyang pulled out the iron rod and thrust again in one smooth motion, taking down another zombie. He even caught the zombie's corpse with his hands, making it fall slowly to the ground without making a sound. This time, he didn't alert any zombies. He had killed zombies before, but this time he realized he was even calmer than before. When the iron rod stabbed in, he even felt as if he were just stabbing a watermelon. Qin Muyang slowly emerged from the pile of cars and continued forward along the street. In the shops on both sides, groups of zombies lay dormant inside, waiting for nightfall or a sound to awaken them. The sun was still shining overhead, and he was already close to his limit. Dehydration, hunger, a body that was already weak to begin with, plus constant movement without any long rest, all of it kept draining his energy. Qin Muyang felt like he could collapse at any moment. If he weren't afraid that the iron rod in his hand would make a sharp noise when it touched the ground, he would even have wanted to use it like a cane. If the kind of situation from the hospital happened again now, where he was being chased by a group of zombies, Qin Muyang was certain he absolutely wouldn't be able to run even 100 meters before being caught by them. He might even suddenly have a heart attack and drop dead on the spot. In those zombie movies and zombie novels, the protagonists are all incredibly strong and absurdly overpowered. Even when injured, they can still run 28,000 li without even stopping to catch their breath, killing whoever stands in their way, be it man or Buddha. But when it came to himself, just climbing over the hospital wall and walking 2 streets already made him feel like he was about to drop dead. It seemed novels and TV really couldn't be trusted. Only practice reveals the truth. Fortunately, this stretch of road was the same as the previous one. There were no zombies wandering outside. As long as he kept the noise down and stayed mentally strong, he could pass through safely. Qin Muyang only needed to expend the strength to keep walking forward, while using his eyes to look for a suitable place to rest or search for supplies. He didn't need to keep dealing with zombies. After much difficulty, he finally passed a convenience store, but the store's door was completely gone. Inside, the shelves were in utter disarray, collapsed into a mess, and everything had long since been looted clean. And there were several zombies trapped inside as well. Even if there were a few overlooked items among the goods that hadn't been taken away, Qin Muyang didn't dare risk going in to search. His stamina could no longer support him in facing so many zombies. After forcing himself onward for a while longer, Qin Muyang truly couldn't walk anymore and only wanted to stop and rest immediately. His lips were already cracked and peeling, and blood was seeping from the splits at the corners of his mouth. He used the towel covering his mouth and nose to wipe the blood clean, hoping the scent of it wouldn't attract the zombies' attention. His breathing gradually grew heavy. Even though he was moving slowly, it felt as if he had just sprinted 100 meters. He even began to see patches of black spots before his eyes, a sign that he was about to faint. Can't sleep, can't sleep. Qin Muyang quietly encouraged himself. because he knew that if he collapsed like this, even if he wasn't eaten by zombies, he would be dehydrated under the sun. Those corpses in videos of people getting lost in the wilderness and then being baked by the sun into charred remains were no joke. Fortunately, the god of fate was still looking after him, because he immediately saw a very small supermarket at the intersection ahead. Although the storefront looked only 6 or 7 meters wide, the glass doors and everything else were intact, and there were still goods visible on the shelves inside, especially in the refrigerated display right by the entrance, which he could see at a glance. It was packed with drinks and bottled water. Qin Muyang's throat bobbed violently, and he almost wanted to rush and immediately clutch a bottle and gulp it down. But the little reason he had left stopped this reckless impulse. He noticed there were several zombies in the store. This time he absolutely could not ignore them. No matter what, he had to find a way to kill these zombies first and then enter the store. Qin Muyang looked over both sides of this small supermarket. On one side was a hot pot restaurant. Its glass door had already shattered into pieces and was scattered everywhere. The inside was pitch black, but there was no putrid stench like the one zombies carried. So there were probably not many zombies inside. On the other side was a tobacco and liquor shop with a frontage only about 2 meters wide. The cigarettes and alcohol had already been almost completely looted, and a half-rotted corpse lay behind the counter. And this tobacco and liquor shop was already at the end of this street, with an intersection just ahead. Qin Muyang did not look any further into the shop's interior. His throat tightened a little. Overall, the surroundings on both sides of this inconspicuous little supermarket were relatively safe, so Qin Muyang could free up his hands to deal with the few zombies inside. Charging straight in was definitely not a wise move. If the zombies swarmed him all at once, he would have no chance of surviving. He thought for a moment, and a plan quickly took shape in his mind. He pulled down the towel covering his mouth and nose, tore off a piece of fabric from his clothing, and dabbed it against his lips. Seeing a small bloodstain appear on the cloth, Qin Muyang put the piece away and pulled the towel back up to cover his mouth and nose again. He prayed that this tiny bloodstain would do the trick. Otherwise, he would have to make a sound to lure the zombies. But making a sound meant putting himself in danger. Qin Muyang gripped the pointed iron rod in his right hand, ready to respond to an attack at any moment. Then he skewered that small, blood-stained piece of cloth on the tip of the rod and pulled open the small supermarket's glass door with his left hand. The glass door opened smoothly without making the slightest noise. Qin Muyang extended the iron rod with the blood-stained cloth on it into the store through the doorway and gently waved it, then waited quietly. More than 10 seconds later, one zombie caught the faint scent of blood and staggered toward the supermarket entrance. Ho! Ho! A low sound came from the zombie's throat as its mouth opened and closed, ready to bite. However, just as it approached the doorway, an iron rod mercilessly pierced straight through its skull. Uffed. Qin Muyang was already starting to get used to the feeling of the iron rod piercing flesh and blood, and he no longer felt the tension and fear he had when he killed a zombie for the first time that morning. He adapted quickly because he knew it was a matter of life and death, and there was no time to be precious about it. Besides, his body was weak right now. All he wanted was to quickly kill these few zombies, then get into the supermarket to find something to eat and drink and have a good rest. If not for his weakened condition, Qin Muyang was certain he could have charged straight into the supermarket and quickly taken down these few zombies. The first zombie in the supermarket fell at the doorway. The noise was neither too loud nor too soft, just enough for the other 2 zombies inside to hear. And the 2 zombies immediately roared and lunged toward the door. After Qin Muyang stabbed down another zombie, the remaining one was already lunging straight at his face. There was no time to pull out the iron rod and stab again. Qin Muyang suddenly raised one leg and kicked at the chest of the oncoming zombie. He had underestimated just how weak he currently was. With that kick, it felt as if he had kicked a block of concrete, and he could not help but fall backward. As for the zombie, it lunged straight at him and crashed onto him, falling to the ground together with him. Bang! The back of his head throbbed with sharp pain again. Qin Muyang wanted to curse. The zombie was pressing on his chest, opening its huge mouth and biting toward his face. The iron rod had already slipped from his hand, and he had no weapon on him to deal with it. A shadow of impending death loomed over him. In his panic, Qin Muyang yanked down the towel covering his mouth and nose and directly threw it over the zombie's face. Although a towel wouldn't really cause any harm to a zombie, nor would it cause suffocation, it firmly covered that foul-smelling mouth, preventing Qin Muyang from being bitten. The zombie's mouth was covered, but its hands started clawing around wildly. Qin Muyang remembered the 3 untouchable rules he had summed up. one of which was that being bitten or scratched would infect you with the zombie virus. As he twisted his body to keep the zombie's hands from grabbing him, he groped around beside him with one hand. Finally, he felt a bottled drink in a glass bottle by the doorway. He immediately grabbed it by the neck, smashed the bottom against the ground, then gripped the jagged broken edge, and drove it straight down into the zombie's head. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Qin Muyang's hand seemed like it had been fitted with an electric motor. Even he himself didn't know how many times he stabbed, until the zombie stopped moving entirely. Only then did he stop and set the broken glass bottle aside. Pushing away the zombie whose head had already been smashed to a pulp, Qin Muyang stood up and straightened his clothes. His hospital gown was already filthy beyond belief, but for the moment he couldn't find any clothes to change into, so he could only keep wearing it. Still, Qin Muyang immediately added finding a change of clothes to his future search list. Although the fight just now hadn't been as quiet as he had hoped, since smashing the glass bottle and the like had all been done inside the store, the noise hadn't carried outside, so there was no need to worry about alerting the zombies scattered around nearby. What's more, there were no zombies in the tobacco and liquor shop next to this supermarket, and the hot pot restaurant on the other side didn't seem to have many zombies either. Looking at the 3 corpses on the ground, Qin Muyang calmly walked to the supermarket's beverage section. First picked up a 1-liter bottle of mineral water, opened it and rinsed his hands with it, then washed his face before starting to gulp it down. After several large mouthfuls of mineral water, Qin Muyang recalled a point of knowledge he had learned before. When a person is extremely thirsty and dehydrated, they should drink slowly and must not take in too much water at once, otherwise it could cause water intoxication. Qin Muyang stopped gulping water. Instead, he only held a mouthful of water in his mouth and slowly swallowed it. Then he found chocolate on the shelf, tore open the wrapper, and with 2 crunching bites finished one, then picked up another, and again finished it in 2 crunching bites. Normally, he couldn't bear to buy this kind of chocolate at all. A small piece cost more than 10 yuan, but now he ate it without a care. Shoplifting really feels great. Qin Muyang couldn't help picking up another piece and eating it. After a bout of ravenous eating, Qin Muyang's earlier hunger and thirst were both relieved, and he stopped. If he kept eating and drinking recklessly, it might cause physical discomfort, so he still needed to take it slowly. Chocolate was high in energy, and after only a few minutes, Qin Muyang felt as if much of his strength had returned. He walked to the doorway and dragged the 3 corpses lying there directly out onto the street, immediately reducing the stench inside the supermarket considerably. After finding a small plastic stool to sit on for a while, Qin Muyang got up again and resumed eating and drinking. This time there was no need for restraint. He ate and drank his fill. He had originally planned to look around the store for some supplies he needed, and that were easy to carry, but the injury from his fall to the ground suddenly started throbbing with intense pain. New injuries piled on top of old ones, and Qin Muyang had no choice but to sit down and rest again. Probably because his body had already made it through the ordeal of hunger and thirst, all the injuries he had sustained in the fight just now started hurting at once. For example, when he fell, he hit his back, and now it was sore and painful. Although they were all the kind of injuries he could endure, they still made him very uncomfortable. Moreover, a spot on his waist felt faintly numb. Qin Muyang didn't remember injuring his waist, so he directly lifted his shirt to check. The moment he lifted his shirt, he immediately noticed a very obvious red finger mark on his waist. Fortunately, it was only a finger mark, with no wound and no broken skin. This was probably from when he had fallen to the ground just now, when the zombie had been flailing and scratching through his clothes. Luckily, this patient gown was fairly thick and durable, otherwise it very likely would have been torn open by the zombie. In that case, Qin Muyang might already have joined the zombie horde by now. After sitting down to rest for a while, Qin Muyang suddenly heard the sound of fingernails scraping the ground from behind him. He instantly shivered, grabbed the iron rod beside him, and turned to look. In the passage between the shelves behind him, a zombie was slowly crawling forward, digging at the ground with both hands. The sound of nails scraping the floor was coming from it. Qin Muyang stood up and took a careful look, and found that the zombie's throat had been bitten open, making it unable to produce that trademark zombie sound. Its lower body was also gone, with its intestines trailing outside, so it could only crawl on the ground. At the sight of this, the food he had just eaten nearly came back up the way it went down. After bracing himself mentally, Qin Muyang stepped forward and pierced the zombie's skull in one strike. The zombie had a bulging black backpack on its back, and it seemed to be stuffed with quite a lot of things. The backpack was nice. It could be used to carry supplies. Qin Muyang crouched down and removed the backpack from the zombie. All along, he had been carrying that makeshift backpack made from a pillowcase and had been worrying about how he would carry so many things from the supermarket. This was truly like someone bringing a pillow just as he was getting sleepy. Opening the backpack, he found a lot of loose change inside, probably money someone had used to pay for things at the supermarket, with many 1 dash, 5 dash, and 10 yuan bills. Besides the change, there was also a key, several bottles of mineral water, some food, a pack of tissues, 2 packs of cigarettes, a windproof lighter, and some other odds and ends. Clearly, this was a fairly decent escape backpack. It was just that the backpack's owner had failed to escape. Following the traces left on the ground by the backpack owner's crawling, Qin Muyang walked deeper into the supermarket. And there was a tiny bathroom. And inside he saw the torso from the waist down, 2 legs already half-rotten. A scene immediately formed in his mind. In a normally operating supermarket, a customer had turned into a zombie and bitten someone. The supermarket owner fled into the bathroom with the backpack on his back, but before he could close the door, his throat was bitten open. After that, the zombie started feasting on his body from the waist, slowly eating him into 2 halves, and he finally died in the bathroom. Because his brain had not been destroyed, even though only half his body remained, he eventually turned into a zombie as well. Among the 3 zombies killed just now, there must have been the chief culprit who killed the supermarket owner.